Hi, everyone. My name is Professor Elvis Cornerstone. I'm into financial economics. And today I'll be discussing with you in the next few minutes, about 25 minutes, on the impact of the COVID-19 on global economies. Not at this present time, but even after the crisis is over, what is going to be the implication to the global economies as a whole. And in fact, it is not enough to jump on to start talking about the impact of the pandemic on various sectors of the economy, like agri, like education, without actually talking about the impact of these on the medical field itself. So I will be touching on a few issues before I will delve into other sectors. So from the start, we will talk more about the of medicine and medical equipment, and my emphasis is also going to be based on the open versus the closed economy, because ever since this whole pandemic started, a lot of countries have been debating whether they should open up the economies or whether they should rather close up their economies. For those who are not really into economics, let me explain the difference between the two types of economies. And the open economy is where one country engages in trade with another. So you open up your economy to be able to transact businesses with the other parts of the world. That is the open kind of economy, and it comes through import and exports. It has to do with the closed economy, where one particular country or various countries decided to be inward looking, and they actually do not really want to have any kind of trade transactions with the other part of the world. They just want to focus on themselves, which is basically termed as the protectionism, and I will be talking more about that as we get along. And now the impacts of the COVID-19 on the global economies is going to be very challenging for trade. Not only in the area of geopolitics, but even in the area of geoeconomics. And I will be talking more about these as we get along. I can see a lot of trade restrictions happening all over the world, not just in one particular country, because this pandemic is not restricted to a particular region or a particular country. This is an issue that is affecting every humanity. It's affecting every human all over the world, and therefore one can foresee a lot of restrictions taking place, not just from from certain parts of certain regions, but it's really going to be implicated in other parts of the world. What this also means is that any decision that is being taken by one particular country is really going to have a negative effect on others, because others may also want to decision made by, let's say, the German government can really be replicated in another country, like say Spain, and other countries could also decide to follow in the same manner, and then it creates a lot of global impacts in the whole world. In this particular situation, one can also say that there is a lower capacity to address the problem at hand, and that is also one major issue, especially if one country decides to be on their own. If Afghanistan, for instance, decide to handle this situation by themselves, the capacity to be able to handle the problems at hand is going to be very limited, because like I've said already, this is a pandemic that is affecting the human race, and therefore the effect of it is not only specific to a particular country. And therefore, the lack of capacity is also one important area that most governments across the world will need to look at. But developing countries are really going to be affected a lot, especially those in Africa and also those in the Asian region who are really in the midst of this pandemic. Eastern European countries, where most of those countries are also underdeveloped, who also really be affected a lot, especially in the area of trade. And you understand why I'm talking about this as I go along by explaining further the reason why I'm saying all this. And moreover, I believe strongly that there's also going to be a protectionism in the area of food security. Example, China. China is a very huge economy with a huge population, and they may want to look at themselves before taking care of the part of the world. Of course, because the pandemic itself started from China, there's going to be a lot of resentment against China, which is already happening. And even after the COVID-19, a lot of countries are really going to resent against China, and I can foresee a lot of trade war between other countries and China, and that is the way most countries and most governments feel at the moment. And the labor market is also going to really be affected so much in terms of the border trade, in terms of open up various economies where there is going to be free movement of goods and services. I can see a lot of frustration in that area. And then also, I can also see a lot of problem in the area of trade finance, and I will talk more about trade finance as we go along. So in the nutshell, these are some of the few areas that I'll be touching on as we go along. Now, let me now begin with the area of the medical field, because I cannot talk about other sectors without talking about the medical field, because what is happening across the whole world is basically an issue that needs a lot of the medical sector to step in to see how it could be addressed. So the question you first want to ask is that how can trade fight the pandemic and also contribute to global health? That is the first question I may want to pose to you. How trade can fight the pandemic and contribute to global health? Ever since this whole situation started, a lot of countries have been deciding as to whether to open up the economy in terms of medical supply or whether they should close the economy. In fact, most countries across the world, are facing two major problems. The problems of losing millions of people, the lives of a lot of people that are being, lost all over the world. That is number one. And number two, the issue that has to do with the world economy. So there's issue of people losing their lives. A lot of countries are losing their citizens. And the second part is the fact that the world economy is actually really struggling. And so these are some of the two major problems that the pandemic has caused. And because of this, a lot of countries, believe that closing up the economy will be the best way to be able to solve the problem. Because when we talk about pandemic, this is an issue that doesn't really know any boundary. Irrespective of wherever you are living, it can really reach you, even with all the various measures that have been put in place. Nobody is safe at this point in time. And therefore, when it comes to the area of medical supply, a lot of countries are not ready to supply to other countries, especially with the developed world. They believe that, look, it is better to take care of their own people than to take care of the rest of the world when their own people are actually struggling. And so when it comes to the aspect of medical resources and supply, this is the stance, because that is what they believe. They need to be inward looking. They need to take care of themselves before they can be able to take care of the rest of the world. So that is one particular area which has actually caused a lot of debate and argument all over the world. So that is in the first instance. And there are others also who believe that being inward looking is not the best way to solve this pandemic, or solve this problem by themselves. Collaborative effort to be able to tackle the issue at core. And so when people or most governments decide to be inward looking, effects not only on the very country that is in question, but it also affects other countries that do not have the capacity to be able to tackle the issue. Because at this point in time, the human race is being affected all over, and to be inward looking might not be the best approach to go about it. That is one school of thought. Now, what about the developing countries? What about a country like Afghanistan? They don't have all the equipment that are really needed to tackle this issue at core. And thank God that at least in most developing countries, the rate of lives that are being lost is quite low when you want to compare this to what is happening in countries like America, like Italy, Spain, and Germany, and all those advanced countries. And they have the best of medical equipment. And yet still, the rate of people that are losing their lives is enormous. And therefore, for the developing world like Afghanistan, that do not really have the best of medical equipment, if the rate at which people are dying in the advanced world should also happen here in Afghanistan or in countries like Africa, then it will be really a very sad situation. But let's assume that this is what is happening, that the situation that is happening in the advanced world is the same thing happening in the developing country like Afghanistan. And that most advanced world decided that, look, they want to be inward looking. They want to take care of themselves before they can take care of those in the developing world. What happened contracted the virus? Then it means that a quite number of the people in developing countries are going to be wiped out. And that is the argument from one school of thought, that should not be the case, because this pandemic is not caused by any particular human being. This is a virus that does not know any boundary, and therefore that collaborative effort to be able to overcome the situation is very, very key. And so if one decides to be inward looking, to be in the form of a closed economy, by not taking care of the rest of the world, the impact in the lives of people. But not only that this affects the lives of people, it also affects the all over the world, because these medical equipments and resources are being provided from other countries. In fact, when it comes to the advanced countries like the US and the EU, they are more into the area of research and development. But when it comes to the supply of medical equipment and resources, they come from other countries like Malaysia, like China, like Japan. And so if Japan, China, and Malaysia decide that, look, they want to be inward looking without supplying these advanced countries with these resources, then we can really see the negative effect it's going to have on the advanced economies. And if these supplying economies decide not to also supply this equipment to the developing world like Afghanistan, then you could also see the negative impact in the lives of people. But one cardinal point I want you to understand, to the area of medical resources and equipment, this is a capital intensive industry. The sector really demands a lot of money in research and development. It also demands a lot of money to be able to build the equipment, let alone to supply. So after having spent a lot of money in research and development, after having spent a lot of money even in the area of building or producing this equipment, and then one decide that, look, we want to supply these equipments, we want to supply these medicines only to our country, then it means that private organizations that are in the supply of medical equipment and resources are really going to be affected negatively, in the sense that they will never be able to get their return from their investment. What I mean by this is that they will never be able to get profit out of the investment they have put into the research and development, and also into the production of the equipment and the resources of the medical field, or the medical sector. And that is why it is very important to understand, and that being inward looking in the form of a closed economy is really going to affect the medical industry, because those who produce the equipment and the resources also rely on the outside world to be able to supply them with this equipment and resources, to be able to supply them with the produced, so that they too can be able to have some kind of return on their initial investment. So that is basically the impact, that the closed economy can create. If the economy is open, resources are then allowed to be supplied in other parts of the world, then of course these countries where they have specialty in the area of producing this equipment will then be motivated And when they are motivated, they are then to have a positive impact in the rest of the world, especially developing countries who cannot be able to produce this equipment by themselves because they don't have the capacity to be able to supply this equipment by themselves, let alone to be able to provide certain resources in the area of medicines to be able to take care of the pandemic. Look at a country like Iran. We all know the problem happening in Iran and the war between the US and Iran. Assume that the US is the only country in the world that supply medicines in order to be able to do this. And because of the war between the US and Iran, they decided that, look, Iran will never receive this from us. And not even just Iran, but the other part of the world. The negative effects on the lives of people in Iran and the economy of Iran is really going to be enormous. And already, when you talk about the punishment is already receiving from the US government, we all know what is happening. And so if you want to actually replicate medicine, then it tells you the impact of this, especially of all that is happening, that is the COVID-19 in the medical sector. And at the end of the day, if people decide to be inward looking, and then most people in this sector are going to look from the producing countries, but also in the area of those who are, how are doctors able to provide the services to the citizens? And then it creates a lot of problems. So that is one very aspect by which I believe strongly that we need to open up the economy. And when the economy is being opened up, and then it creates the opportunity from the side of the industry motivated to produce more. Happen, then they are able to help to be able to combat this disease, because it is not a one country problem. This is a pandemic, and it is for crisis. And so that is my stance from the medical point of view. Okay, now we all understand that historically, globalization, almost all of us countries decide to specialize in the area of marketing. Some countries specialize in the area of branding, of manufacturing of goods and services. And because of this, globalization has helped, and the movement of goods and services and people across borders, where people are able to get jobs for themselves and for their families, and people are able to earn, decent income when they across borders, and then they are able to take care of their own and the needs of the family, and that is the way life is supposed to be. And so trying to close up economies out of this, the movement of goods, not just from that angle, is also going to affect of people, and when it happens, then a lot of families are really going to be affected. And so because of